Hello, everybody. I'm Sandra Weingarten, a member of the Eugene Symphony Guild Board, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this next in our series of Soundwaves performances. The Symphony Guild sponsors these concert previews as one of the many ways in which we support our Eugene Symphony. We do a lot of fundraising, we supply volunteer ushers for the youth concerts, and we sponsor the Young Artist Competition. With the challenges of working during COVID, we've had to become more creative in our fundraising. So this year, we will be presenting a virtual Music in the Garden in place of our traditional garden tour. Planning is well underway, so stay tuned for more updates. We invite interested community members to join us in the work and the fun, and more information about us is available on our website, eugenesymphonyguild.org. And now, welcome our maestro, Francesco Lecce-Chong, to introduce this program.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for this Eugene Symphony Guild concert preview. And thanks as always to the amazing Eugene Symphony Guild for their support and hosting this pre-concert talk. I'm so delighted you'll get to see the latest Eugene Symphony Soundwaves performance, which will be premiering on April 1st at 7 p.m. You can get all the details on our website at eugenesymphony.org. We have so much incredible music in this new program. A few pieces that I have been dying to do and some other pieces I haven't been doing in a while. It's a really fun program that once again shows off the amazing players in our string section. But before we get down to the music, I actually shot a couple backstage videos while I was in the rehearsal process, just to give you a sense of kind of what's going on, because it's very different than our typical week of making music together. So I thought you might enjoy seeing a little bit of the background and what's going on. So this first video takes you a little more on the backstage area of kind of where I am in my dressing room, and then kind of the works our way all the way to get on stage. So hope you enjoy getting to see a little bit behind the scenes here. Hey, what up everybody? Thanks for joining me for a little tour. We're actually in between rehearsals right now. We take quite long breaks because, just for health reasons, clearing out all the air in the hall. So we sort of have these extra long breaks, so I thought I'd give you a little tour of what's going on around here. We're actually starting off in my dressing room. I love the dressing rooms here at the Holt Center. We're so lucky to be a resident company. It's such a great space, and they take such good care of us, and I always feel really spoiled. So this is kind of like my dressing room. Very well, it feels fancy to me at least, because it's a whole separate room back here where I can get changed, even if people are coming to visit me, and they're out in this kind of conference area where I got some tables and a couch. So it's very nice. It's probably important when they have people who are way more famous than me here, but I feel super spoiled getting to have all this space to work in. So anyways, I'm gonna take you out and let's see what's going on out there. I have absolutely no idea what's happening, but here we are backstage, and this is kind of our runway. This is where we first come into the hall, and where we came from. You can see we've got musicians really spread out right now because everyone obviously has to have a lot of distance between them. So we've got people, we're utilizing a lot more spaces than we normally would, so we can keep all the members of the orchestra kind of having their own little space. So as you can see, this is deserted right now. It would normally not quite be this way. It's even got arrows about where we're supposed to walk. But yeah, every time we come in, we're filling out one of these health questionnaires, getting our temperature taken, all that good stuff. Huge loading elevator, good for the pianos. Anything else? What else? Yeah. I mean, this is where our audience would go. If we're getting out to the seats, some of you might recognize this. If you're going to the pre-concert talks, they're down that way. But right around here is where you would get out to the hall. And here we are. We certainly miss having you guys filling up this space. I will certainly say that. But we're glad to at least be back home in some capacity here, making music. So there you go. Home sweet home. All right, anyways, I'll take you up the back way up to the stage. Yeah. So this is our walk back around the other way. As you can see, lots of things have happened here. This is what I can spend my time doing if we're like holding before a concert because everyone hasn't arrived yet or whatever. I'll spend my time reading some of these, all of the notes that people have left from all the various Broadway shows that have come through. Hi, Ruth.
Hello.
Our stage manager. And here's backstage. Again, usually full of people. It's Kristen, our librarian. Hey.
Who is it?
And yeah, you can see a lot of space because when these complex Broadway shows come through, you gotta have a lot of room here. So, but we do a pretty good job of filling it up under normal circumstances. Anyways, so let's see. So this is where, under normal circumstances, I'd be held back here, and then they send me out when I'm supposed to walk on stage, and then ta-da, here we are. So welcome to the stage. Got some kind of cool side lighting that we're trying out this time. And as you can see, things are a little different. We've got about 30 string players on stage, everyone really, quite distant from each other. And one of the things you might not realize that makes it particularly difficult for string players is they're used to sharing one stand, which means one of them can page turn. And it's really remarkably complicated because string players have to just play so much that we have to do all this like cutting and pasting and all these fancy tricks to try to hide page turns because it gets out of control at a certain point. So yeah, that's our view out here. You don't even really see them. You can catch a few of these great cameras we've got here at the Hall Center. We got one there. We've got one kind of dead center. One over to the side. We've even got, if you look carefully, here I'll walk closer so you can see this one. We got one like hooked up right over here. There you can see it. So it all can be operated remotely. And then we got the so-called Conductor Cam, the camera I hate the most because I have to see myself. But there you go. That's behind the orchestra. Oh, and look at that. We got percussion this time. There we go. So yeah, here's what a musician gets to see if they're playing here on stage. As you can see, you guys get a pretty good view when you're sitting out there, but man, it looks good from over here too. I mean, just what a gorgeous space. Oh, so we miss you guys like crazy. This is what we need to have all those seats filled with people, and it's going to happen soon. But in the meantime, we're glad we can make music and share it with all you guys, and can't wait to be back together in this great space. So look forward to seeing you in the meantime at another one of our virtual concerts. All right, everyone. See you soon. So that gives you a little taste of some of sort of my area of working from my dressing room out onto stage. But yeah, as you saw, there's all these different cameras that we have in different spots in the hall, some of them being operated directly and some of them being remotely moved around. It's quite amazing. And all of that, I don't even want to think about like miles of cable or something to take all of the cameras and all the wires and everything and the sound, and it's all being funneled into a dressing room closer to where I was when I first started the talk, and everything's being funneled back there. And at that point, there's just kind of the hub where the actual video directing is happening. And so in this next video, I go back to that dressing room and talk to some of the people back there, and you can see some of the work that's going on behind the scenes. I think in particular, I talked to Daniel Cho, our conducting fellow, whose job is not listening for balance in the hall anymore because everything is being recorded, but instead is helping to call the shots, making sure that we're catching key moments in the pieces. And of course, our executive director, Scott Freck, is in that room as well, helping direct things, making everything happen. So I hope you enjoyed getting a little bit of a view into the technical aspects that are happening while we're out there working on stage.
That's awesome.
Have like a collection.
Okay. Cats watching Symphony program. Are they in a position?
I love how we've converted this dressing room. Say hi, Daniel.
Hi.
What are you working on right now? Are you marking all the mistakes I made?
Yes.
All right,
yes,
good.
All the many
Good.
mistakes.
That's why we're friends. Great. No, seriously, actually, what are these notes for cameras and stuff?
Yeah, so I'm putting in like when we're gonna point what and at who, and then when to let Nathan, our producer, know exactly where to change the camera angles.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, you got the front row seat, I see. Cool. Look who it is. I was credited as my producer, not my director.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. You threw me under the bus. He's directing, I'm producing. I really don't know the difference.
Hey, everybody. All right. Yeah, we're even missing a couple people, but
Yeah.
cool. What do you have in front of you?
Well, I've got a variety of things. I've got a nice headset in case we want to talk to the crew. I've got my copy of scores. I've got our lists. This is handwritten. This is professional. This is how
Yeah,
professional
there we go. That's how it works.
And only I can read it. List of the presets we have on the two robotic
Oh, yeah.
cameras. So we know
Nice.
which shots we're trying to get, and we have a lot of great options.
Nice. All
We've
right.
been working on the lighting.
I was gonna say this lighting looks fantastic. We added how many more lights did we add? You think?
Oh,
stage.
well, we brought up the intensity of what we already had,
Oh, I see.
and then we've added about a dozen more lights
Nice.
in different places.
Very nice. Yeah, I think it's really. Yeah, it just gives a sense for it. You just want to capture kind of it really is beautiful. I really like the way this shell looks behind. You know, it's not just one of those white plain things. So
Yeah,
I think getting to show it off a little more is great.
yeah, it's funny. It looks very different in the room than when it was on screen,
Yeah.
and then it's a shame because the shell really is beautiful. That wood grain is a gorgeous color up close, and
Yeah.
just these cameras are awesome, but they just eat light for lunch, so it just everything looks darker. So you know.
Nice.
I think it's going to look a lot better, and we just going to keep working on improving.
We're all such perfectionists. Great. Okay. So there you go. Some of what's going on in that back room. The intensity in these recording sessions is just crazy because it's not just all the musicians on stage and myself who are just so intensely focused during these times. But, if anything goes wrong, technically speaking, then there's a whole other group of people who are stressing out and trying to solve things in real time. And nothing ever goes smooth. I can tell you that. I've done a lot of these now in Santa Rosa and Eugene. There is never a time where things happen the way you plan. It just doesn't exist. And while musically speaking, that's kind of the point, right? You want to be spontaneous and on stage, and the whole joy of live music is nothing's ever going to go exactly the way you plan it. But when it comes to like operating a camera, or a microphone, you kind of want some consistency there. So I'm not jealous of what they have to worry about, which really, everything has to go according to plan, or you really do have to make some changes to make it happen. But I think this next, I'm really excited to see this next one. As you can see, every concert, we're perfecting things, we're fine-tuning things, especially in the visuals, because this is all new for us. The Health Center with all this amazing new equipment, and also for us as far as working with them and creating the concert experience that we want. So it's very cool to watch it over time, and over the next couple months, it'll be great to see it continue to grow and continue to get fine-tuned. So that's a little bit on that end, and I think we should get into some of this great music on this program. We're actually opening up with the monumental work on this program, Shostakovich's Chamber Symphony. This is a piece. I mean, I've known most of my life. It's such a classic in the repertoire, and originally was written as a string quartet, Shostakovich's 8th string quartet. And it's a piece that pretty much every string player is going to play at some point. Actually, our conducting fellow, Daniel Cho, is a violinist as well, and he was saying it was actually one of the first chamber music pieces he even ever played. That's how famous it is. Incredibly difficult, but it's also one of those pieces that we all kind of get thrown in on the deep end at some point in our lives if we're a string player. I remember distinctly the first time I heard it, I think being played by the Takish Quartet when I was like in high school. But I remember it because the visceral impact of this piece is unlike anything else. And then you take that string quartet and you blow it up into string orchestra size. So, every part is being, instead of having one player, you're having like at least 6, 8, 10 players on that part. You're really creating this just intense experience. So this is a piece I've known my whole life, never had a chance to do because, again, generally speaking, you're not going to want to spend half of a concert using just your string section if you're a full symphony orchestra and, you're doing, say, 9 subscription weeks a year, like the Eugene Symphony. You want to include everyone in your orchestra. So this isn't exactly going to be the first piece you go to. But it is a symphony. It feels like a symphony. It has everything you'd want to have in a Shostakovich symphony, as monumental as any of the other symphonies that he wrote. And it was incredible to have an experience to actually get to conduct this and lead this performance with my colleagues, because this piece, it's like all of Shostakovich's pieces. I don't think you can hear a work by him and not feel like you've been changed by the journey at the end. Not in any like specific way, but you just feel like you've had this experience that lasted far longer than whatever the length of pieces. I mean, this piece is only 23 minutes long, but it might as well have been an hour-long symphony for what kind of he takes you through over the course of this piece. Now, when it comes to Shostakovich, I have a lot of trouble talking about him, because what we know about him is so conflicted, and so many people try to speak for him or have tried to speak for him over the years, and he is so twisted up in the politics of First World War II and then the Cold War, or later on, that it's hard to kind of pull him away from that and get any sort of sense for what were his motivations. Part of the problem is there were some things that were taken for granted. For instance, this book Testimony, which was supposed to be Shostakovich's memoirs. It seems like it's pretty easy to put a lot of holes in this book and say, well, even if this was Shostakovich speaking much later in life, looking back, he seems himself to be rewriting or re-explaining things that he did or wrote about earlier. So even if it was from him, it conflicts with itself. It is fascinating to kind of look back on him, but the more I read, the more I realize how much of an enigma he is, in trying to understand his motivations for what he did. The good news is, ultimately, it's about the music, and the music speaks to the deep emotions that he went through during his lifetime, the struggles that he went through, and that's ultimately what comes through. So he writes this piece in 1960, and it's interesting because a lot of what we talk about with Shostakovich was his altercations with Stalin and that the whole era of the Soviet Union, and all the censorship that was put upon artists, and of course artists that simply disappeared if they didn't do what the government wanted them to do art-wise. And it was said, and this I believe, that Shostakovich was ready to, had his bags packed in case he was about to be shipped out to Siberia or something, because he definitely consistently ran afoul of the government, and it was always kind of touch and go with them throughout that era. This piece, though, now we're moving beyond. So Stalin has died, and Shostakovich has just joined the Communist Party. That's a whole nother thing, right? Because people say he was forced to join the Communist Party. People say that actually he believed at least in its better qualities. Who knows? But at any rate, it's definitely a different era for Shostakovich, because he's not trying to play games with the government as far as writing pieces that he thinks won't get him killed, but also expressing what he wants to in his music. That is sort of changed a little, changed when he comes to a piece like this. And instead of even trying to find something maybe triumphant or uplifting, this piece is devastating in its musical content. In 1960, Shostakovich is visiting Dresden, and he experiences the absolute devastation from all the bombings during World War II. And it severely affected him, and that's kind of where this piece grows out of. In fact, the first page, it has this dedication, dedicated to victims of fascism and war. Again, there are people that say that was imposed upon him by the government, that he had to have that dedication. And in fact, this piece is really a requiem of sorts for Shostakovich himself. Because, as we're about to see, this is a piece about Shostakovich. I mean, yes, there's that dedication. Yes, there's this devastation that he is experiencing, but he's experiencing it internally. And I think this is perhaps the most intimate portrait we get of Shostakovich, whatever you believe the piece might be saying. And why do we know this? Because Shostakovich puts his initials all over this piece. All right. And it takes a little bit of explaining, because you might think, okay, like, first of all, the Russian alphabet isn't going to equate to our musical notes in the first place. So we got that issue, but then also that would just be, 2 notes, right? So you have to kind of get your way there. But how it happens is you transliterate it, right, into German, and so you end up with D for his first name and then SCH for his last name. So DSCH. And of course, you might think, well, S and H we don't have notes that we call S and H. And so again, there's like another little leap that you take. So you have D, obviously, and then you have E flat. And the reason is in German, E flat is S. So there you get it's pronounced S in German. So that's why you get E flat. So D, E flat, and then C, and then H, which is B natural in German. So you get this. And I guess for Shostakovich, it's a very unique grouping of notes, right? You have two notes very close to each other, the first two, and then the next two are really close to each other. So you get the sort of interesting kind of clash of notes. There's a lot of tightness around those notes, but you also have one leap. You also get one leap between 2 of those notes. So I think part of what makes it so recognizable is actually just what happens to be those 4 notes, that we can really recognize that. And right from the get-go, I mean, literally the very first thing that happens in this piece is the cellos and basses go. And then the violas answer. And then the second violins. And then the first violins. So the whole opening of this piece is this very dark, moody spinning out of Shostakovich initials. That's what it is. And it continues, obviously, throughout every movement, every of the 5 movements of this chamber symphony. His initials make their way into each movement in unique ways. I can't think of a work where a composer did something quite so obviously personal, but of course, musically, it also has, it's a very intimate work, even in the string orchestra form, and when it's not string quartet. You sense it's a very personal piece, but also, like, right in your face is Dvorak just repeating his initials over and over in these many forms. So, ultimately, when you listen to this piece, I think it's, when it comes to Shostakovich, it's better not to try to put meaning on top of it. What makes Shostakovich's music so important, what makes him this composer that we continue to connect through his music and have such a profound impact on us when we hear it, is because when a composer writes something that's so personal and so close to them, it in a odd way it becomes universal, because we all experience these strong emotions for different reasons and in different ways. But when a composer gives so much of themselves and what they've experienced into a piece of music, it connects with all of us, because we've all had various experiences that have caused those emotions to come to us, that have created these sorts of ideas and feelings that Shostakovich is pouring into his music. So just to sort of finish this one up, when I think of Shostakovich, there's a couple things. The first thing that comes to me is perseverance. Rather than trying to think, was Shostakovich giving in to the authorities? Was he, was he being subversive? Was he giving something to the authorities he thought they might want, but actually he wasn't? Instead of worrying about kind of what was he trying to do with this piece, I think one of the things that connects so much of his work is the idea of perseverance, that whatever the struggle, whatever the fight, whatever one is going through, it is this need to persevere, to create and persevere. That is ultimately the story of Shostakovich's life that we can all agree on, is that whatever it was, he persevered and he continued to create amazing music. The other thing that you'll notice in this piece and in many of his works is how he uses violence and darkness and fear in his music. And he uses these not to just pound it into us, but to actually create moments of incredible beauty and transcendence. And that's only possible because of how dark Shostakovich goes in his music at times. And you'll hear, even in the midst of terror and violence, there's these moments in the Chamber Symphony that are even more beautiful because of that. I'm thinking near the end, there's a cello solo that time just stops for a moment, and all of the hope and the light that we had seemed to be missing is even more bright and even stronger, because we haven't had it. We've been starved from it in this piece, and when it happens, it's really unlike anything else. So I mean, that's what I take away from Shostakovich is that the idea of perseverance and using the extremes to bring strength to both ideas. As much as he himself suffered and clearly was affected by those who suffered around him, he also understands that he can use that to highlight the most beautiful moments and highlight how important collective hope is for everyone to have. So that'll be our first half of our program, and then we're gonna have some lighter fare in the second half. And I actually am not gonna quite go in concert order. I wanted to kind of go more chronologically through the three works in this second half. So we're actually going to start talking about the piece that's going to finish our program by Edward Elgar, who lived from 1857 to 1934. He spent most of his early career as a violinist, and this serenade is from 1892. It's one of my favorite works. It's only about 12 minutes long, 3 brief but absolutely beautiful movements. And I think this says so much about Elgar that in many ways this piece is like a toss-off for him. Like if you were to write me a piece right now, this is the kind of piece that Elgar would just he'd just toss up. He'd like, oh, here, you need a piece? Let me give you this piece. And yet in these 12 minutes, there's so much in there. There's this nostalgia through all of it, this wistfulness, and then in intense moments that just kind of appear out of nowhere in each of these movements. I love conducting this piece because I feel like if you were to distill a massive symphony, perhaps a symphony by Elgar, and just take all the bits and shorten everything until it fits in 12 minutes, you might end up with a piece like this. So it's always great fun to return to a work like that. And that's how we'll actually finish our entire program. But we have two other composers on this second half, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor and Florence Price. Now, Coleridge-Taylor is an English composer born in London in 1875, studied at the Royal College of Music, and in fact got a lot of career help from Edward Elgar. He ended up writing some massive pieces, became very famous for these cantatas that he was writing. He actually took some tours through the US, was received at the White House by Theodore Roosevelt. So, he was a big name in his day, and it's great to return to some of his music. I think what you'll find in these two Novelletten that we're going to play from 1903 is just the inventiveness that he brings to his music. Using a string section, but also including percussion instruments with it. And just the harmonies and the virtuosity. It is such fun and colorful music. It's so tragic that he died when he was 37, because one can only imagine how he would have grown over the years and the new explorations he would have done in music, because he was such a curious composer who was so innovative and always looking for like the next thing to bring into his music. And Florence Price is a composer born in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1887. She actually had a work in 1933 premiered by the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. It was her first symphony, and it actually just won a competition, and that's how the Chicago Symphony ended up playing it. She actually majored in piano and organ at the New England Conservatory of Music. And the piece we're going to be playing by her for string orchestra is actually a larger version of a movement of her first string quartet. And I think what you'll immediately hear from her is kind of taking the mantle from Antonin Dvorak, who, when he came to work in the U.S. and wrote the New World Symphony, was trying to show that American composers should be using our so-called folk music in the same way that Dvorak would have used his Czech upbringing to inspire his style of European romantic music. He thought American composers should be doing the same. And Florence Price really took that on. You can hear in this piece, actually, it seems a little bit like Dvorak at times, but it's a little more authentically American, because Dvorak could never escape his Czech roots, even in the New World Symphony. But Florence Price, in this piece, you'll see much more a true inspiration being taken from African American spirituals and folk tunes that she brings into this piece, while you can see clearly her being steeped in this European romantic tradition of Elgar and Coleridge-Taylor. So, Coleridge-Taylor and Price, these are two composers who, we don't play often enough. And now with finally some more effort going into bringing back some of these Black composers who had been honestly just kind of left behind over the past 40 or 50 years. It's great to see a lot of their music coming back into concert halls. Will it ever become, a kind of a staple of the repertoire? I'm not entirely sure. I think Coleridge-Taylor, just given the breadth of what he wrote, possibly. Florence Price just suffered from a lack of opportunity when it came to writing for big orchestras. She actually wrote 4 symphonies. One of them is lost. The other ones, one of them wasn't even performed in her lifetime. The other 2 only received a couple performances. And I wanted to finish with this because, as you'll notice, the Eugene Symphony has been commissioning so much music since I've joined, and we have many more commissions coming up from wonderful composers all across the U.S. from many different backgrounds. And the reason why it's important to commission new works is we're the Eugene Symphony. We're not the New York Phil. And when we commission a composer to write a piece, they're not going to instantly become famous around the world. But the composers we're commissioning are ones who already, I believe, are making a huge impact on the classical music world. Take a composer like one of our upcoming composers, Angelica Negron. She, already this season is having works premiered by some of the major orchestras in the U.S., with many more on the horizon. And she's one of the biggest names in composition right now. But we're going to be the ones to premiere kind of her first really large scale symphony, like a 30-40 minute piece from her as part of our first symphony project. Why is this important? Well, that's how composers grow, is by having their music performed, by getting to write pieces and constantly kind of tinker with it. All of the great composers in the past, they weren't geniuses at writing for orchestra immediately. It's over time. It's such a huge art form. There's so much that goes into it. And every time I work with composers, when I've commissioned things from them, it's very much a dialogue. It's not like they just deliver a score and we play it and it sounds great. There's always a conversation that goes around these pieces. And there are so many great composers who, constantly went back and redid their orchestral pieces, or we just see them growing over time. And, we can't name them right now, but, so many composers where you probably don't hear their first couple symphonies that often. You hear their later orchestral works as they start developing and gaining more confidence in writing for orchestras. So a composer like Florence Price, who knows some of the incredible things that she could have written if she had been given the opportunity to have her works performed much more, given many more opportunities to hear her pieces, to work with different conductors, to work with different orchestras. And that's one of my big missions now, is to make sure that the next generation of these incredible composers who are working right now have the opportunities to grow the way that composers 100 years ago used to have those opportunities. So just kind of wanted to finish with that, since I think in performing the works of Coleridge, Taylor, and Price, it's a legacy that continues now, and in making sure that composers have the opportunities they need when they're first starting off and as they continue their careers. So thank you so much for joining me. It's been great to have you along, and I really hope you enjoy this next Soundwaves concert from the Eugene Symphony. Once again, premiering on April 1st at 7 p.m. Come check it out at our website, eugenesymphony.org. Thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you again next time.